A friend. Quickly. They're coming.
I told you to stay back!
No.
Get out of here! Now!
Never. I know you.
Keep it down. Stop fighting.
Come on, you beast!
I will.
No! Stay back!
The wind over the Texas borderlands changed first. It always did. It came down off the caprock, thin and sharp, carrying no dust, no scent of cattle, nothing but a stillness that made the mesquite branches stop their clicking. Coyotes that had been calling to each other for the better part of an hour went silent mid-cry. A lone barn owl lifted off a fence post and did not return. Somewhere past the ridge, the moon was already rising too early, bleeding pale light over the caprock stone before the sun had fully surrendered the sky. Inside the trading post, a lamp guttered, though no door stood open. A dog beneath the porch began to whine low in its throat, pressing itself flat to the boards, eyes fixed on the tree line. Nothing had happened yet, but the land knew. The land always knew first. Se essa história já está te prendendo, se inscreva no canal, deixa o like e conta nos comentários de qual país e cidade você está assistindo. A fogueira está acesa. E essa aqui promete ser longa. Let's begin. Caleb Rourke had buried 3 men that year, and none of them had died the way the county record said they had. He was 28, broad through the shoulders from 10 years of fence work and cattle drives, with a face that had gone hard too early, sun cracked at the eyes, jaw set like he was always waiting for bad news. He ran a modest spread 12 miles south of the Nueces crossing, inherited from a father who died coughing blood into a handkerchief, and left him nothing but land, debt, and a name nobody in 3 counties trusted anymore. The trouble had started the winter before, when Caleb had gone out after a wolf that wasn't a wolf. He didn't talk about that night. He didn't let himself think about it in daylight, when the thinking could be controlled, shaped into something survivable. But at night, alone in the house his father built, he'd catch himself standing at the window, with his knuckles pressed wide against the sill, staring at the moon like it owed him an answer. The bite had healed clean. That was the strange part. No scar worth mentioning, nothing a doctor would remark on. But something underneath had not healed at all. Something had taken root. He kept a padlock on the root cellar door now. Kept chains coiled by the bedpost, though he'd never once used them, because using them meant admitting what he already knew. The town of Bell's Ferry sat 9 miles east, a scatter of clapboard buildings holding the line against the empty. Caleb rode in twice a month for supplies and nothing more, because twice a month was as much proximity to other people as he trusted himself with anymore. He kept his eyes down at the mercantile. He paid in exact coin, so there'd be no lingering over change. He did not stay for supper at the boarding house, though Mrs. Pruitt always asked out of a kindness he no longer felt he'd earned. It was on one of these trips in the flat white heat of late afternoon that he first saw her. She was crouched at the edge of the trading post's yard over a ranch hand who'd caught a mule kick to the ribs. Small hands, quick and certain, pressing a poultice of crushed herbs against the man's side while he groaned and swore. She didn't flinch at the swearing. She didn't look up when a crowd of onlookers murmured about her. An Apache woman, alone, working on a white man's yard like she had every right to be there, which Caleb supposed she did, though half the town would have argued otherwise. Nobody had told him her name. Nobody had introduced her. She was, to the men gathered there, only the healer woman, spoken with the particular flatness people used for things they needed, but did not wish to owe anything to. What Caleb noticed, what he could not stop noticing, even as he told himself to look away, was that she was not afraid of anything in that yard. Not of the crowd's low muttering, not of the ranch hand's pain, which she handled like weather, something to be managed rather than mourned. And when her eyes lifted for just a moment and crossed the distance to where Caleb stood holding his horse's reins, she did not look away either. She looked at him the way a person looks at a storm system on the horizon. not with fear, but with calculation, sizing up how far off it still was and how much time remained before it broke. Caleb mounted up before she could say anything to him. He told himself it meant nothing, a stranger's glance, nothing more. But that night, alone in his father's house, he found himself standing at the window again. And for the first time in a year, the thing he was watching for wasn't the moon. It was the road east, the one that led back toward Bell's Ferry, toward a yard where a woman with steady hands and unafraid eyes had looked at him like she already knew exactly what he carried beneath his skin. He didn't sleep that night. Something in him, old animal alert, had caught her scent on the wind hours after she was gone, and it would not let him rest. The attacks on the herd had started in October, 3 months before Caleb ever laid eyes on the healer woman. It began with a heifer found gutted at the tree line, not eaten so much as opened, in a way no coyote or cougar would trouble itself to do. Caleb's father was already 6 weeks in the ground by then, and the ranch was Caleb's alone to defend. Thin as that defense was, with one hired hand who quit inside a fortnight, spooked by tracks in the mud that started as a wolf's and ended impossibly as something closer to a man's. Caleb didn't believe in curses. He believed in wolves, in mountain lions, in men desperate enough to poison a rival's stock. So he sat up 3 nights running with his father's rifle across his knees, waiting for an explanation he could shoot. On the 4th night, the moon came up swollen and close, and the thing that walked out of the mesquite scrub was not an explanation he could shoot, though he tried. It stood the height of a door frame, wrong in every proportion a wolf ought to have. Too broad through the shoulder, too upright, moving on legs that bent like a man's knees turned backward. Fur matted dark over muscle that shifted with each step. Its eyes caught the lamplight from the porch and threw it back amber, unblinking, patient in a way that made Caleb's hands shake around the rifle stock. He fired once. The shot went wide, or it didn't matter. The creature crossed the yard faster than anything that size should move, and the last clear thing Caleb remembered was the rifle spinning out of his grip into the dirt, and pain lancing white-hot through his forearm where the thing's jaw closed and released, almost thoughtful, almost deliberate, like it had taken exactly what it came for and nothing more. Then it was gone, back into the scrub, and Caleb was alone in the yard with his ruined sleeve and a wound that should have killed him, and somehow by morning had not. He told the doctor in Bell's Ferry it was a dog bite. The doctor cleaned it, stitched it, said the boy had been lucky. Caleb did not feel lucky. He felt, in the weeks that followed, a change moving through him slow as a root growing through stone, a sharpening of his hearing, a new and terrible awareness of the moon's position in the sky at every hour of the day, a hunger that had nothing to do with food. If this story's already pulling you in, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit that like and drop a comment with the country and city you're watching from. It helps more than you'd think. The first change came on the next full moon. Caleb had chained the root cellar door from the inside, not trusting himself, and it was a decision that likely saved a dozen lives in Nueces County, because what happened to him that night in the dark and the stone below his own house was not something he remembered in full. Only fragments. The scrape of claws where fingers should be. A voice his own twisting into something that was not speech. Hours he could not account for, and come morning, splinters of wood under his fingernails from where he'd clawed at a door he himself had locked. He buried the memory the way he buried everything, deep and alone and without ceremony. But the herd kept dying, not by his hand. He made sure of that, chaining himself tighter with each cycle, starving himself thin in the days leading up to the moon so the thing inside him would have less to work with. Yet something else moved through the borderland now, too, something that had been there before Caleb's bite, maybe long before, and it left tracks that weren't his, kills that weren't his, and a fear in Bell's Ferry that had started to gather like storm clouds with nowhere yet to break. That fear was what brought the healer woman's name into rumor at the trading post months later, right around the time Caleb rode in and saw her crouched in the yard with her steady, unafraid hands. Because the old-timers said her people had stories about the borderland going back generations. Stories about a hunger that walked upright, that had walked this land since before any rancher's fence went up. Stories, some said, about how to see the man still trapped inside the beast and how to end the loop his father, and now Caleb, had inherited without ever asking for it. Caleb didn't know any of that the day he first saw her. He only knew that something in him, the animal part, the part that no longer entirely obeyed his will, had recognized something in her before his mind caught up to why. She came on the second evening after the trading post, riding a paint mare that picked its way through the mesquite like it already knew the path. Caleb saw her from the porch and every animal instinct in him. The old one, the new one, the one that had teeth now when the moon was right, told him to run for the cellar and lock the door before she got close enough to see anything worth seeing. He didn't run. Something in the set of her shoulders as she approached, unhurried, unarmed, told him running would insult whatever she'd come to say. "You've got something living in you that isn't yours," she said before he'd even helped her down. No greeting, no hesitation. She dismounted on her own, tied the mare to his fence post with hands that didn't shake, though every rational instinct should have told her to be afraid of a man alone on an empty ranch who everyone in 3 counties already half suspected. "Ma'am, I don't know what you..." "Don't."
Leave.
One word, flat as a closed door. Caleb stopped talking. She walked past him toward the house without waiting for an invitation and stopped at the edge of the yard where the grass had been torn up in long gouges, claw marks he'd tried and failed to disguise as plow damage. She crouched the way she had over the injured ranch hand and touched the torn earth with 2 fingers, testing it the way another person might test whether a stove was still hot. "How long?" she asked. Since October." "You've been chaining yourself." It wasn't a question, so he didn't answer it as one. He only watched her. The animal part of him gone very still and very alert, the way it went before something dangerous crossed into its territory. She was the danger here. He understood that with total clarity, though he could not have said what kind. She didn't ask him for his story. She didn't demand an explanation of the bite, the herd, the months of silence and starvation and locked doors. Instead, she simply stayed, sat on the porch step at a careful distance, and watched the tree line the way Caleb himself watched it every night, as if she were reading something written in the shadows that he'd long since gone blind to. An hour passed with almost nothing said between them. Caleb found the silence harder to bear than any interrogation could have been. He kept waiting for judgment, for fear, for the flinch he'd seen on every face in Bell's Ferry since the rumors started, and it never came. She only watched, waited, testing something in him that had nothing to do with words. Near dusk, a rattlesnake surfaced from beneath the porch boards, close enough to strike at her boot. Caleb moved without thinking, put himself between her and the snake with his bare hand out. No weapon, nothing but reflex and a willingness to take the bite meant for someone else. The snake retreated into the brush. Caleb's heart was hammering, more from what he'd just revealed about himself than from the danger. She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she'd arrived, something in her face eased. "Most men would have stepped back," she said. "Let the snake decide who mattered more." "Didn't think about it. That's the part that matters." She rose, brushing dust from her skirt. "A man who doesn't think before he protects something, that's not nothing out here." She told him her name then. Not offered like a gift, not withheld like a test passed. Simply spoken plain the way a person shares something once they've decided it's safe to. Nasha. It meant, she said, something close to she who struggles. A name her grandmother had given her before she was born, for reasons nobody living now remembered. Caleb said it back once, quiet, like he was setting something down carefully so it wouldn't break. Nasha told him before she rode out that evening that the thing hunting his herd was not the same thing that had bitten him, that 2 hungers moved through this land now, tangled together, and that her people had old knowledge of both. She did not tell him everything. She measured out what she gave him the way she'd measured the poultice for the ranch hand's ribs. Exactly enough, no more. "I'll come back," she said, swinging back up onto the mare. "There's a way to see the man still in you, but it isn't gentle, and it isn't fast." She left him standing in the yard as the first stars broke through, the claw marks in the grass between them like a boundary neither of them had crossed yet. and for the first time in months, Caleb did not spend the night watching the moon. He spent it thinking about a name. Nasha returned 6 days later with a bundle of dried herbs, a stone the color of old rust, and a warning she gave before she'd even dismounted. "Someone's been asking about you in town," she said. "A man named Garrett Voss. Says he's tracking a stock killer for the county. Says he has proof it's you." Caleb's stomach went cold. He knew Voss, a bounty man who drifted through Nueces County every few years, hired by ranchers desperate enough to pay for results and unconcerned with how those results were reached. Voss didn't care about truth. He cared about a body to show the men who'd hired him. "There's a way to loosen what's inside you," Nasha said, unpacking the herbs onto the porch step with the same steady care she brought to every wound she'd ever dressed. "Not remove it, nothing removes it, but quiet it. Enough that you keep yourself, even under the full moon. My grandmother taught me the working. I've done it twice before for men whose names I won't say." "When?" "Tonight. The moon's close enough tonight." She built a small fire in the yard as the sky purpled toward dusk, and had Caleb sit within its ring while she worked the herbs into a paste and pressed the rust-colored stone into his palm, closing his fingers over it herself. She spoke words in a language Caleb didn't know, low and rhythmic, and for the first time since October, he felt the animal thing inside him go quiet. Not gone, but listening, the way a dog steals when a hand rests on its head. That was when the riders came. 4 of them, Voss at the front, rifles carried low and ready, but not yet raised, held across saddles in the flat, deliberate way of men who'd done this before and didn't need to rush it. Torchlight threw long shadow across the yard as they reined up at the fence line. "Rourke," Voss's voice carried easy across the dark. "Step away from the fire where we can see you. This is my land, Voss. Your land's got a dead heifer half a mile back with the same marks as 6 others this year. And now I ride up and find you sitting in some kind of Indian ritual fire with a woman half the town's already talking about." Voss's rifle stayed low, but his men fanned out along the fence, spreading the way men do when they mean to close a circle. "Makes a fellow wonder what exactly you are, Rourke." Nasha rose slowly, placing herself at Caleb's shoulder rather than behind him. "The killings didn't start with him. Don't reckon that's your business to weigh in on." The moon cleared the ridge behind them, full and close, and Caleb felt the working Nasha had done inside him strain like a rope taking weight. Quieting the change, but not stopping it. Not with 4 rifles and a torch and a decade of the county's suspicion bearing down on him all at once. His hands ached, his vision sharpened at the edges into something too clean, too bright. "Nasha," he said low. "Get behind the house." She didn't move. "The stone stays in your hand. Whatever happens, don't let go of it." Voss's patience ran out. He raised the rifle, not yet aimed, just lifted, a warning made visible. And one of his men, younger, more nervous, brought his own weapon up too fast and too high. That was when the tree line behind the bounty men erupted. The thing that came out of the dark was not Caleb, and everyone in that yard knew it instantly by the sheer wrongness of its size. 7 feet of matted fur and amber eyes crossing the open ground faster than torchlight could track it. The old hunger that had haunted Nueces County long before Caleb Rourke ever took a bite from it. It went for the nearest rider, and the night dissolved into screaming horses and torches dropped into dry grass and men firing blind into darkness that swallowed the muzzle flashes whole. Caleb felt the stone burn hot in his closed fist, felt Nasha's working strain and hold, keeping the man inside him tethered even as every instinct screamed to answer the older creature's challenge with a challenge of his own. He grabbed a fallen torch instead, put himself between Nasha and the chaos, and for one long moment stood in the firelight as something that was neither fully man nor fully the thing he feared, steady, controlled, present, while Voss's remaining men scattered into the dark, more afraid now of the old hunger than of anything they'd ridden out to prove about Caleb Rourke. When the yard went quiet again, the creature gone back into the scrub, one bounty man lay unmoving near the fence, the aftermath grim and unmistakable even in torchlight, though nothing about it needed further describing. Voss himself was gone, his horse's tracks cutting hard back toward Bell's Ferry, and Caleb stood alone in the trampled grass with the rust stone still clenched in his fist and Nasha's hand steady on his shoulder. You held, she said quietly, through all of it. You held? Caleb looked down at his own hands, human hands, shaken but human, and understood for the first time that holding was its own kind of victory, even when nothing else about that night had gone the way anyone intended. Nasha told him what the old creature was 3 nights later, sitting across the same fire where the working had first held him steady. It had been a man once, generations back, a settler who'd broken a promise made to her grandmother's grandmother over grazing rights on land that was never his to claim. The bite he'd taken in punishment never worn off him the way it wore off other men, because he had never once, in all his long, unnatural years, tried to hold on to what remained human in himself. He had let the hunger own him completely, and in the letting, it had made him something that could no longer be reasoned with, only ended. It's been killing since before your father built this house, Nasha said. It won't stop with you. It will just keep finding the next man fool enough to walk these borderlands alone at night. Then it ends with me. Not alone, it doesn't. Her voice held no argument, only fact. You held the man in you together. That night at the fence, you'll need to hold it again, and worse, before this is finished. They went out together 3 nights later under a moon just past full, following tracks that Nasha read in the dirt like sentences. The old creature's habit of circling wide around the Rourke land before doubling back, testing the same weakness night after night, the way water tests a crack in stone. She'd brought more of the rust-colored stone, ground now into a paste she worked into the collar of Caleb's shirt close against his throat, so the working would stay close no matter what his body became. They found it in a dry wash 2 miles east, hunched over a fresh kill it hadn't finished, a young steer, the aftermath grim enough that Caleb made himself look away rather than dwell on it. The creature raised its head at their approach, amber eyes catching what little moonlight reached the wash floor, and rose to its full towering height with a slowness that was almost contemptuous, as if it had been waiting for exactly this confrontation for longer than Caleb had been alive. If you're still with us this deep into the story, now's a good time to hit subscribe. There's a whole fireside of these waiting for you, and I'd hate for you to miss the next one. The fight that followed was not the clean thing stories usually promised. It was ugly and fast and mostly blind. 2 shapes grappling in near darkness with a violence too immediate for either of them to fully track. Caleb felt the change take him, despite everything Nasha's working could do to slow it. Felt his own hands become something other than hands. Felt the animal in him rise to meet the older hunger head on, because some fights could only be answered in the same language they were started in. What held him from losing himself entirely wasn't the stone, though the stone burned hot enough against his throat to leave a mark that would never fully fade. It was Nasha's voice, cutting through the wash from where she stood at its edge, steady and unafraid the way it had been since the first day he'd seen her. Not calling his name, but calling the parts of himself he'd been trying to bury since October, reminding the animal that there was still a man underneath worth protecting. The old creature went down hard against the wash's stone bank and did not rise again. What was left of it by the time the moon crossed past its peak was barely recognizable as anything that had once worn a man's shape. And Caleb, kneeling in the dirt on hands that were his own again, understood that the ending of a century-old hunger looked nothing like triumph. It looked like exhaustion and grief, and a silence that took a long time to feel like relief. Nasha knelt beside him afterward and pressed something small and cold into his palm. A single claw, black and curved, broken loose in the fight. Keep this, she said, not as a trophy, as a reminder of what you chose not to become. Caleb closed his fingers around it the way he had once closed them around the rust-colored stone, and understood that some things a man carries are meant to weigh him down just enough to keep him honest. The herd stopped dying after that. Boss never returned to Nueces County, and whatever story he told the ranchers who'd hired him, it wasn't one that held Caleb Rourke's name in it anymore. The hunger inside Caleb never fully left. Nasha had told him true that first night, that nothing removes it, only quiets it. But he learned to carry it the way a man learns to carry an old wound, aware of its weight, never again mistaking it for the whole of himself. He kept the claw in a small tin box on his windowsill where the moon could find it every month, whether he wanted it to or not. Some nights he took it out and held it, turning it over in his fingers, remembering a dry wash and a voice that had called him back from something no chain could have held. Nasha stayed in Nueces County longer than either of them had planned, not because the curse demanded it, because some things once chosen are harder to put down than a curse ever was. If this story kept you close to the fire tonight, stay a little longer. Subscribe, and I'll see you at the next one.